Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 1 of my August wrap-up. Also, apologies again, if you can hear the fan, I have to have that on, so hopefully it's not too distracting. As always, I will have captions on this video, so hopefully that will help if that's an issue. So the first book, I read quite a few books this month. The first one is Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. This was our Past It Classics pick for, why do I always do this? July, I think. But we actually did our live show partway through August. We decided to push it back a couple of weeks because this is quite a chunky book and we wanted to give all of us plenty of time to get through it. This book deals a lot with the way that money influences decisions about marriage and love. So Alice Vavasor, arguably our main character, is a young woman who is engaged to this man John Gray, who she loves, and he's wonderful. Everybody thinks it's going to be a great match, but she starts doubting if she's actually going to be happy with him and if it would actually be fair to marry him if she's not sure. And to complicate matters, she is sort of getting drawn to her cousin who, because this is set back in time, so that was fine, who, like, they had been involved before, and he's, like, not really a great person. Most people are like, you shouldn't associate with him anymore, and she actually had broken it off with him once because of something he did, so that's kind of adding to that. And then we are also following Mrs. Greenow, who is a wealthy widow who's being courted by two different men. One is a very well-off farmer, and one is a kind of no-good soldier who doesn't have any money or resources at all. And then our last main female character we're following is Lady Glencora. Yes, and she was kind of pressured into marrying Plantagenet Palliser, which, like, this is the first book in the Palliser novel series. She was kind of pressured into marrying him, but she's being tempted by the man that she was in love with before, and they actually almost ran away together, this man named Burgo Fitzgerald. So you can kind of see how a lot of their problems sort of overlap, kind of choosing between what is safe and what is maybe more romantic or more appealing at the moment, and also how money really influences all of that. And yeah, like, I liked this. This was a very interesting reading experience. We did a whole live show on this, which I hosted on my channel, so I will link that down below. There was so much to talk about. I really loved the writing and the humor. That was one of my favorite things. There was some really funny, like, commentary about, like, politics and everything. There were some parts, I think, that were like plot-related things related to the politics that was maybe not as engaging, but the actual, like, humor of that was great. I really liked our main female characters. I really felt for them. These were just, like, such fantastically developed women, like, so well written, and even if you didn't always, like, agree with their choices, like Alice in particular, it's like, why are you doing this? I think that the book did a good job of making it believable why she would make this choice, even if, like, you were yelling at her not to do it. And they're just such complex women. I think Anthony Trollope did a really great job of writing these fully realized female characters. I thought the commentary on class and money was really interesting and really good. I just think his characterization in general was excellent, like the way he would introduce characters and the way that all of these people were such a mix of good and bad. It just felt very human, and it was a very compassionate way to view them, although there were definitely a few characters where, like, I think they were bad. I had kind of mixed feelings on, like, the overall story though. Like, some aspects of the plot I didn't like truly, I wish George Vavasor's part, like, Alice's cousin, like, every time we got to his plot line, I just was so bored. Like, I hated it. I didn't like him. I didn't care about anything that happened to him, and I just didn't like that so much of the story involved him. And then also there was some issues with, like, sexism in this book. So the perspective on women was kind of inconsistent, because sometimes it was, like, these really great female characters, and then sometimes, like, the perspective on women or, like, what happened with them was like, oh, that's not great. Like, one of my big problems with this book was, like, the endings for two of the three female characters where, like, it wasn't necessarily what happened, it was the way it was written about and kind of the message it feels like we were supposed to take from that. Although even that, it was kind of an interesting mix, because one of the three main female characters, like, I did not think I would like her ending, but I think it was actually the most satisfying, and it was the one that I felt most confident about her happiness for. So that was really interesting, and yeah, like, this was just a very interesting mixed bag, but overall I enjoyed it. It was definitely an engaging read, and it read pretty quickly for such a chunky book, and I gave Can You Forgive Her 3.5 stars, and I'm really looking forward to reading more from Anthony Trollope. I have a couple other books of his, and my experience with this one definitely has me excited to continue. Next is Bright Smoke, Cold Fire by Rosamund Hodge. This is the first book in a duology that is a fantasy version of Romeo and Juliet, and there's, like, necromancy, and it's, like, a very kind of dark fantasy. So, like, little mini backstory on this book. Rosamund Hodge is one of my favorite authors, and I said in my TBR video that I have literally never heard a good thing about this series. Like, nobody likes these books, even people who like her other books. So even though I like her as an author, I love her as an author, I was nervous about this one, and I am so happy to say that I actually really enjoyed this. Like, this is really, if I needed an extra, like, reason, this has really solidified Rosamund Hodge as a favorite author for me, because there were things about this that made me think I might not like it. I also don't like necromancy in stories, so there were a lot of reasons I was nervous about how I would feel about this one, but I thought it was really well done. I'm gonna say, before I get into the synopsis, it's gonna probably sound like a lot and like it's gonna be kind of complicated, but I promise it's like not confusing in the book. But so this is a fantasy version of Romeo and Juliet, and we are following two main characters, or like four main characters, but two of them are perspective characters, and those are Runaho, who is kind of like a Rosalind character, which I would have been even more excited for this book if I knew that, because I love Rosalind, especially like in retellings. I think she's such a cool character to follow, so that was great. And then our other perspective character is Paris, who I just loved. We'll get to him, but I adored him. So there are two like perspective characters, and then Romeo and Juliet are also in this book. So the setup for this world is that there was this cataclysmic event that basically meant now there's only one safe place that they know of for people to live. Beyond that, there is danger and monsters, and even within this safe place, they have to like periodically sacrifice people in order to keep the magic going that is protecting this one city. And within this city there are like multiple kind of factions or different families. We have the Mahiani, who are basically the Montague family. We have the Catersu, who are the Capulet family. We also have the High Biarans, I think they're called, who are a different family, and we have all these other characters and families as well, but those are like the main families. And so Romeo is one of the Mahiani family, and Juliet is a member of the Catersu family, but she actually doesn't have a name. She's just known as the Juliet, because in this version of the story, the Catersu family have a young woman every generation who is known as the Juliet, and she is like basically, they call her like the sword of the Catersu, so she is magically bound to seek vengeance for any harm done to the Catersu family. And that's what the Juliet character that we're following, like she is the Juliet of that generation. And as in the original play, the Catersu and the Mahiani families do not like each other. I mean, basically there's a lot of conflict with all of these families, including those two, and Juliet and Romeo do end up falling in love, and it is disastrous. And that kind of all happens like prior to the start of the story. And basically what happens, and the thing that ties these four main characters together, is that Juliet tries to, I'm saying Juliet even though that's not officially her name, but Juliet tries to kind of break the magical bonds that are put on her. To do that, she and Romeo try and do this kind of like ritual, and it goes very, very badly wrong, and it actually kills Juliet, and it binds her spirit to Runaho, who is one of the Mayani family, and she is actually a member of this like kind of religious order who does the sacrifices that keeps the city going. So Juliet and Runaho are bound together. Neither of them are happy about this, and Paris actually gets bound to Romeo. So this whole thing is a mess. Paris was actually supposed to be the guardian of the Juliet, and now he's like the guardian of like the man who he kind of sees as like ruining everything. And that's kind of like the setup. And Runaho is like, she feels like she's the only one who is recognizing that something is going wrong with the protection magic, and her and Juliet sort of grudgingly end up becoming friends and trying to work together to figure out what they can do. There are like these like evil monsters that seem to be like getting inside the city when they're not supposed to be. There are like murders that start happening. So as you can see, the synopsis sounds like way too much is going on, but it really didn't feel like that in the book. I hope I didn't make it sound more confusing than it is, because I did really, really enjoy this. I just always love the way that Rosamund Hodge writes and creates characters and sets up her world. Like I don't really know how to explain it, but the way she writes just sells me on things that I wouldn't normally like. Like Runaho, for example, I really liked her as a main character, and she's a character type who I maybe wouldn't like normally. She's very like abrasive and strong in like I don't know, strong in like a headstrong way, which I can often find very difficult. But I think what made it better is, one, Runaho is actually intelligent. She doesn't like get herself into stupid situations like just because she's a strong female character or whatever. But also I think the way that Rosamund Hodge writes those characters, it feels genuine rather than like performative or pretentious. Like a lot of times those like generic strong female characters feel very fake, and Runaho didn't feel that way to me. And I really liked her and Juliet's developing friendship, kind of like grudging friendship, but I just really liked seeing them work together. I loved Paris. I mentioned like I just love him as a character so much. He's just like trying his best and I love him for it, because he like, nobody in his family ever expected him to amount to anything. He wasn't even supposed to be the protector for the Juliet, but bad things happened, and so he ended up being put in this position, and he doesn't feel ready for it, and everyone is telling him he's not ready for it, and that he's not good for anything, and he doesn't think he's good at things, but he just keeps trying, and that makes him better. I have a lot of feelings about Paris. I just loved him in this book. I saw like some reviews, people didn't like him and they found him boring, and it's like, I just love him. Romeo was like kind of my least favorite of the four main characters, but I think he was a good example of what he was supposed to be. Like, he was a little bit, like, he was romantic to the point of being a little ridiculous, which kind of didn't bother me. Like, that seemed to fit him. And Paris's reactions to that were just hysterical. Like, this this poor boy, like, Romeo would be like, you know, just declaiming like poetry about how much he loves Juliet, and Paris is like, okay, but can we figure out a plan, please? Like, I just want to address the problem. Like, I just loved these characters. I thought the world was super interesting. I liked how messy the morality of this world and of these characters were, like, because throughout the book you're kind of like changing your mind about which of the characters is like, or which of the families is like the worst bad guy, because when you're reading from one perspective it's like, oh, it's definitely these other people, but then when you're reading about what they do, it's like, well, that's not okay either. And it just felt very believable, and especially the way that these characters have to come to terms with the fact that they've grown up thinking that they are the good guys, and maybe they're not, maybe nobody is, or maybe they have to be the good guys separate from the bad things that their family is doing, if that makes sense. Like, maybe they have a chance to choose right, even if their family hasn't been doing that before, if that makes sense. Yeah, so I feel like I've been rambling about this book a lot. I definitely see why it has low reviews. Like, it's a very strange story. Rosamund Hodge she writes very bizarre books that just work for me. Like, they seem like they shouldn't work. Like, it seems like all of these story elements couldn't possibly come together coherently, but for me it felt like they did. I really liked this. I gave Bright Smoke, Cold Fire 4 stars. I'm really excited for the sequel. Next, I finished The Selection by Kira Cass. This is of course the first book in a very, very well-known dystopian series, or kind of dystopian, and this was like a very interesting reading experience for me. I was worried I was gonna hate it. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it either. I gave it 2.5 stars, so I wasn't a big fan. But the thing that surprised me is that the things that frustrated me about this book were not the things that I was worried I wouldn't like necessarily. Yeah, so like, basic setup for this, it's sold a lot as like a dystopian version of The Bachelor, which, like, I can see, that kind of makes sense. Our main character is America Singer, and in this dystopian version of the United States, or like, it's set where the US used to be, she is one of the women to be chosen from by the prince, whose name is Maxon. This country, Alea, is now run by a monarchy, and every time they have an heir, they have this selection where they choose their romantic partner from like all of these, like, they're basically auditioning, and there's this like caste system based on numbers. And yeah, like, I didn't like this very much, but it was a very quick read, and I think that's what made this less frustrating, because I have recently read some books I really didn't like that took me a very long time to read, which was just a miserable experience. So to have this one that I wasn't liking but was at least very quick and engaging was like a much more positive experience for me. I didn't love America. I was kind of prepared not to like her based on things I had heard, but not ironically, but like surprisingly, the things I didn't like about her were like little things, not so much like her flat or like irritating personality, which she was flat and irritating, but like little things like how America is the only girl in the entire selection who likes to wear pants, and things like that. Like, just ridiculous details that just like grated on my nerves. I also felt kind of meh about Maxon. Like, he was fine. I actually didn't dislike him. He had a couple of good scenes, but I don't know, I don't feel like he was super charming, and he was clearly supposed to be very charming, and he also was like kind of frustrating. Like, I do think we had some good moments of him like realizing how sheltered he was, and that like people in his country are hurting and he's not doing anything about it because he just like he's just not engaged. So I thought there was some good stuff there, but he's like he does some pretty like stupid things sometimes, or there's like a couple things he does that were really frustrating. Like at one point, because of course there's a bitchy mean girl in the selection, because how can you have that many women together and not have one of them be a bitch, right? And so America is like talking to him about her and how she's just like really awful, and she's kind of sabotaging the other girls, and just like she's not a nice person, and she's like, hey, you should know this. She's like pretending to be really sweet to win your hand, but she's not a nice person. And like Maxon is like, no, she's always nice to me. You must be mistaken, America. And I'm like, are you serious? It's like she's competing to be the ruler of a country and to like win your hand and like get all of this power. You don't think maybe she treats you differently than she treats her competition? Like, you dummy. So yeah, Maxon I had mixed feelings about. He was fine though. I did like Marley. Marley was probably my favorite part of this book. She was really fun. I liked just her as a character. She was one of the friends that America makes. And like I said, this was a really quick read. I think like my biggest problem with this book though is that the world was both too much and too little. Like one of the complaints I had heard is that this didn't go far enough as a dystopian, and that actually didn't bother me because I don't like dystopians. So I was like, that's fine with me. But I felt like once I got to this book, it just felt icky. Like there were references to really, really horrible things happening in this world, but then it's like also this really lighthearted tone, and I just feel like those things did not go together at all. Like I think if we had gone one direction or the other, this would have been a lot better. Like if it had been just like a totally like light and fluffy story, that would have been fine. Or if it had really like dealt with how messed up this selection process was, because like it was like the book acknowledged that other things in the world were bad, but not like the basic premise of this book being really messed up. And that really bothered me. Like I don't know, like if this had been like a fantasy, maybe that would have been fine and we could have come up with like, I don't know, some plot reason why the selection had to happen this way. I would have been, I think, much more satisfied with that. But making it a dystopian and kind of making it seem like you're kind of acknowledging how messed up this world is, but not really. I just think that was a very unfortunate combination for me personally. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but yeah, I didn't like that aspect of this book. Like I said, I gave this selection 2.5 stars, but I am going to continue because I'm kind of interested, and it was a quick read and I own the other books. So, you know, it was an interesting experience. Sorry, I'm talking way too much. Next is Fashion in the Time of William Shakespeare by Sarah Jane Downing. This is a very short nonfiction book, and I have really loved two other nonfiction books that I read by this author. I really liked her Jane Austen one, and I really, really loved the one that she did on cosmetics and beauty. This one was not as good in my opinion. I gave it 3.5 stars, so it was still interesting and it wasn't bad, just compared to how much I enjoyed those other books. I didn't enjoy it as much. As you can tell from the title, this talks about fashion in the time of William Shakespeare, so in Elizabethan England, and there's like some really beautiful like illustrations included, which I really liked. I do think it was interesting. I didn't like the organization of this though. It felt kind of vague apart from the like chapter titles. It felt like within those chapters it wasn't super well organized, and I think the writing itself could sometimes be, it could have been a little clearer, so that was disappointing. But I did find this interesting. I really liked some of the like little details or kind of like fun or interesting facts we learned. Like I did not realize, like if you read a lot of classics or historical fiction, you know that the kind of like hat trim and accessory shop is called the Milliner's. I did not know until reading this book that the reason it's called that is because way back when they were sold from Milan in Italy, so they were called, like the shops ended up becoming known as milliners, which I just thought that was really interesting. As somebody who reads that word a lot, I thought that was kind of cool. So I would recommend this as kind of a good overview or like starting point, or even like if you already know some things about the fashion of this time, I think that you would probably find some little details you didn't know. So I do think this is worth reading, and it's very quick to read. It just wasn't my favorite. And also like in hindsight, considering the title of the book, I would have liked a little more emphasis on fashions used in costuming, like for Shakespeare's plays or for contemporary plays, like contemporaries of Shakespeare's, I mean. So that was also a disappointment, but like I did like this, and again, wouldn't like steer people away from it. Next, I finished The Gentleman and the Thief by Sarah M. Eden. This is the second book in the Penny Dreadful series, Dread Penny. I don't remember what the name of the series is, but this is a proper romance book, and it is a sequel to The Lady and the Highwayman, which I really enjoyed. I read that like a couple years ago now, and this was kind of a disappointment for me. I think partly because I had really, really high expectations going into this book, because we had seen the couple briefly in the first book. We had seen them interact a little bit, and I really liked their interactions. I was like, ooh, I'm getting some vibes. I like this like possible romance. So when I found out that they were going to be the main characters of the next book, I was really excited. And this was just kind of fine. So we're following two main characters, Hollis and Anna, and Hollis is a member of the Dread Penny Society, which are a group of Penny Dreadful writers who use the proceeds to like help the community in London. They help like get people out of poverty, they help get people jobs, they help protect them from like exploitative work practices, and they save people from like human trafficking and things like that. So they do a lot of really good work, and I just love that premise, like using literature to fund social change. I love that. And so Hollis is one of those members, and he is kind of one of the upperclassmen. His family doesn't have any money really anymore, but he's very high in society, so he's kind of like their in for high society things. And he kind of feels like that's all he's good for. He wants to actually do like more exciting or what he feels like is more important work. And then Anna, our female main character, she works at a school. She teaches piano, and she ends up tutoring Hollis's niece, so that's kind of how they spend more time together. But also at night, she's a thief. She like sneaks into wealthy people's houses and steals back personal mementos or tokens that belonged to her family before they were ruined by a business partner who betrayed them. And also Anna and Hollis kind of end up teaming up to solve these robberies, some of which Anna might actually be committing, so that's messy. But they end up working together on things, and they end up spending a lot of time together, and like other plot things happen. And of course, they're both keeping secrets. Hollis doesn't want Anna to know that he's actually broke and that he has to work for a living by writing these stories. And Anna, of course, can't tell him that she's a thief. And yeah, so like this was just kind of fine for me. I don't feel like our main characters were as well developed as in other books in the series, especially Anna. I feel like I liked her, but I don't feel like I knew her super well outside of like her one goal. And then Hollis, I found his dilemma interesting. Like, I really felt for his feeling of kind of inadequacy. Like, he feels like he's just like the former rich boy who can get them into parties, and he wants to do more than that. So I thought that was interesting. Their romance just didn't work for me as much, and I think that's partly at least personal preference, because I like there to be a lot more build up. Whereas in this book, Anna and Hollis both know that they like the other person pretty early on, and I just don't find that as interesting. Also, we do still get Penny Dreadfuls, like 2 different Penny Dreadfuls in the story that we see. So that was fun, although one of the 2 I didn't find interesting at all. The other one I thought was kind of a fun take on a ghost story. And then also, I just don't like one of the overarching plot threads of this series. I just don't find it interesting, like this whole like criminal conspiracy that the Dreadpenny Society is uncovering. Like, I just don't care about that. Like, I think that doing good in the community and like the personal conflicts, I think that by itself is interesting enough that I just don't think we need that. So I found those parts kind of irritating as well. Yeah, so like I said, I did like Hollis. I did like the premise. I thought, again, the social issues in this book, I liked the way that those were touched on. So this wasn't bad. I just was disappointed in it for certain reasons, and I gave The Gentleman and the Thief 3. I kind of stuck between 3 and 3.5 stars. Like, some of it was good, but it just wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be. Next I finished We Had a Little Real Estate Problem, The Unheralded Story of Native Americans and Comedy by Cliff Nesteroff. This is a nonfiction book, and I heard about this from Beautifully Bookish Bethany, and I'm so glad I did because I thought this was fantastic. This is a book that collects a lot of like firsthand interviews and accounts and experiences from current Native American or First Nations comics, and it talks about their influences and who inspired them. There's a lot in this book on Charlie Hill and Will Rogers, who, like, I had never heard of Charlie Hill before this because I just don't know a lot about comedy, but like, he's so cool. Like, his work was so funny. I looked up several of like clips involving him, and I just thought that was really great. And this book also covers a lot of Native American and First Nations history, so you have kind of that thorough grounding as you get into the comedy. So it combines that history, it combines current Native issues and Native comedians, and like the long history of Native comedy, and how like the perspective in the US and presumably in Canada as well is that like Native people like don't have comedy, or like that's like there's like the stereotype of like the very stoic Native American, and how that's not the case. Like, as one of the members of the 1491 says, humor is very much a part of Native culture, and so you see that in this book. And again, I just thought this was really fantastic. I really like the way that this book blended history and current issues and comedy. I just think that was great. And as other reviewers have said, you don't have to be a fan of or knowledgeable about comedy in order to enjoy this book or to get a lot out of this book, because I'm not super interested in stand-up usually, but I thought this was excellent. I loved the comedy bits. Like I said, I looked up multiple clips of some of the people they talked about. So I just think this is a very like approachable book, even if this is not normally, like, even if comedy is not usually your thing. I also thought the structure of this book was really interesting. Like, sometimes we would, like, it was roughly chronological in terms of like the history, and then like leading into some of the earlier comics, and like the like Wild West shows and how those came about. And then obviously getting more and more modern as the book went, but sometimes they would like circle back, and it just was never confusing. I'm just really impressed at that. I also really love that this book shows kind of the history of activism, and how like one of the arguments I feel like that people today use is like, oh, well, people are just too sensitive now. Like, people never used to be bothered by these things, and, you know, like woke culture and all of that. And I love that this book shows that like that's not actually true. Like, way back in like the silent movie era, there were already like advocacy groups, for example, who were like, hey, could you maybe cast Native Americans to play Native Americans? And like that representation conversation is one that I sometimes think, and like we think of as being a very like recent thing, and it's not. And I really appreciated that. I also just think it was really interesting seeing kind of the beginning of comedy as a genre. Like you don't think about some of these things as like needing to be techniques that were developed. Like you just think of them as like, oh, that's how you do comedy. But like, for example, Will Rogers started as doing rope tricks, and when he would miss, he would kind of like make a joke to like smooth it over, and kind of how when he started then like getting into comedy and actually doing comedy by itself, if a joke wouldn't land, he would have kind of a joke to cover that up, and how that was like, it's just, you don't think of that as being a technique that somebody had to develop. You just think of like, oh, that's what comedians have to do. So anyway, I highly recommend this. It does get obviously dark in parts because it talks about the history of the way that white people have treated Native people. So there is some discussion of like really heavy material, but this book also deals obviously with a lot of humor, and I just think all of those things were very well balanced in this book. And I gave We Had a Little Real Estate Problem 5 stars. Next, I finished Bull by David Elliott, and I actually got this book as part of a very generous giveaway from Literary Gladiators. I will link their channel down below, of course. And this is a novel in verse that's like a retelling of the story of the Minotaur from Greek mythology. And I remember when this came out, it got pretty mediocre or mixed reviews. And after reading it, I can see why. And I don't think I would necessarily recommend it for like beginners to novel in verse, even though like stylistically it's very easy to follow and it's like a quick read. It's not like hard to read or anything. So I see why it got mixed reviews, but I really liked this. I thought this was really well done. It is very short, it is very quick, and this is a retelling of the Minotaur story that really focuses a lot on Asterion, who is actually the Minotaur. And it's narrated primarily by Poseidon, who's the one who like starts the ball rolling like with this punishment that like he's punishing King Minos, I think is his name, which means that his wife is punished, and which means that Asterion is punished. And so Poseidon's kind of the narrator for it, but we hear a lot from Asterion and we hear a lot from other characters in the story as well. And I just thought this was really well done. I think there was a surprising amount of character work given how short this book is, and given how, like, you know, the poetry form you don't always think of as being like a great vehicle for character development, which, like, as somebody who loves novels in verse, I shouldn't be surprised at that anymore, but I just was very impressed by that. I think that the way that Pasiphae is described, like her feelings for her son, I really liked the take on that in this story, and I thought that was really interesting. I really love that you can see how fierce and brave and determined Ariadne is right from the beginning, which makes what happens with her later even, like, it hurts even more. But like, as I said in my Goodreads review, I did not intend for this pun to happen, but the star of the show is Asterion. His name means star. Like, I just felt for him so much. I think his emotional, like, what he's going through was communicated so well. And one thing that really impressed me about this story is that the way it was written and the way Asterion's point of view was written, it felt like the first time I was reading this story. Like, I was horrified by what Asterion went through. My heart broke for him, for how lonely he was. Like, all of those things, it felt like I was reading them for the first time. So I was really impressed with that. And I also just think the poetry itself was very good. David Elliott, I think, did a really great job using these different poetic forms. And with both of the novels in verse I've read from him, like, I read them and I enjoy the poetry and I think he does a good job with it. And then I read his afterword where he talks about how he chose poetry forms, how he used them, like the restrictions they put on him, and I'm even more impressed. So I did really like this. I gave Bull 4 stars. I will say that it's not an especially pleasant experience to read Poseidon as the narrator, but I also don't think it's supposed to be. So just keep that in mind, but I did enjoy this. Next, I finished A Chorus Rises by Bethany C. Morrow. This is the companion sequel to A Song Below Water. We are following a different main character and a different story, but I do definitely think you would need to read the first book to follow this one. So we're following Naima, who was a supporting character in the first book. So we're following kind of the aftermath of what happened in the first book, and especially like what Naima did in the first book at the end, and how that affects the way people perceive her. So Naima is one of the Elokos, who are a magical group in this world who are really beloved. They're very popular and everyone always loves them. And so Naima is not used to getting kind of this bad press. And so as a way to kind of get away from that, she ends up going to a family reunion. And while she's there, she ends up like learning a lot more, not just about her family and like reconnecting with her family, but she starts learning more about maybe what Eloko magic is actually supposed to be used for. She also realizes that she does still have a devoted fan following, like a community of people who love her, but that maybe that's not as good as she thinks it is. Like maybe like it starts looking like that's like a dangerous group of people, so she's dealing with that. And yeah, like I said in my anticipated releases video that like I love a well done mean girl redemption arc, which is one of the reasons I was really excited for this book, and this is, I think, a very well done mean girl redemption arc. Like I really enjoyed this. I really loved following Naima as a main character. She's so interesting and she's so like flawed and complex, and I just love her, like, because you understand why she does some of the things she does, but you're also like, ooh, that's not okay. I love her bond with her family. Like one of her cousins, like their friendship was just so wonderful. I loved them. I loved seeing them together and hang out and give each other a hard time, but also really be there for each other and support each other. I loved the themes and like the messages about like family and history. I also really loved the exploration of the Eloko magic or like the Eloko like abilities, and like seeing Naima start to explore those more and think about like how she can use those better, or like what she really is supposed to be doing with them. I also think the social commentary of this book is brilliant, and like I said with A Song Below Water, I think Bethany C. Morrow does such a good job of using fantastical elements to talk about real world issues. I think sometimes when books do that, it can feel almost like they're cheapening the real issues, but I never felt like that with either of these two books. I think that Bethany C. Morrow just did a really great job of using them to point to real issues. Like this book also deals with kind of the model minority idea. Like I think this book handled themes so well. I think it was a great character study. I think the story and the exploration of this magic was really interesting. Like all around, I just think this book was really well done. I gave A Chorus Rises 4.5 stars, and I think even if you were kind of lukewarm about A Song Below Water, I would still recommend this book because I think it's even better, and it is definitely like a different story, and I think it's more focused. I think that was one of the issues people had with the first book. Next, I finished another companion sequel, and that is Much Ado About Baseball by Rajani LaRocca. This was another one of my most anticipated releases because I loved Midsummer's Mayhem, and Much Ado About Nothing is like tied for my favorite Shakespeare play, so I was very excited about this. This is set in the same city as Midsummer's Mayhem, but we are following different characters, and it's like a really different focus. Our two main characters are Trish and Ben, and they both end up on the same baseball team, which is not great because they're actually sort of enemies, because they were also they're both into baseball and they're both into math, and they were also on competing in the same like math tournament, and because of some things that went down there, they really don't like each other, and so they're not thrilled to be on the same baseball team. But then they start getting these mysterious like riddles or math questions that they kind of end up working together on, and they also end up working together to try to help their baseball team, so they end up slowly becoming friends. And then they also end up finding this snack shop where like the snacks may or may not be magical, so that's part of the story as well. And yeah, like I did really enjoy this. I didn't love it quite as much as Midsummer's Mayhem, but it was still wonderful. I really liked Trish and Ben's friendship. Of course, I really liked the like food magic or cooking magic. I liked the way the family elements were done in this book. I also liked the little like Shakespeare references or comments we got. Like at one point they watch A Midsummer Night's Dream, the play, and like one of the characters is like, wow, that seems pretty messed up about like Queen Titania, and that just like really worked for me because I also think that was really messed up what happened to Titania, so that was a fun element. There's also some pretty emotional parts in this book that I think were handled really well. I also ended up eventually enjoying the like math and baseball elements. I wasn't like as into those as at the beginning because I'm a very casual baseball watcher, and I'm not really a fan of math. Like I'm good at math, but I don't enjoy it, so it took me a little while to warm up to that part of the book. But once I did really enjoy that. I really liked seeing Trish and Ben work together on these puzzles. One thing I didn't really like though is the fight between them felt kind of forced. Like the reason that they didn't like each other and like them like not liking each other very much at the beginning of the book, it felt kind of forced and more like it was happening because of the original play than because of what made sense for these characters. And maybe it was just that I wanted them to be friends earlier, but like I just didn't really like how that was done, and I would have liked that to be done differently. But other than that, I really loved this. I gave Much Ado About Baseball 4.5 stars, and I would just like Rajani LaRocca to keep adapting Shakespeare. Like please just retell all the Shakespeare. I love that. Next, I finished Faith Unraveled, How a Girl Who Knew All the Answers Learned to Ask Questions by Rachel Held Evans. This was previously titled Evolving in Monkeytown, and this is a nonfiction book that is I guess it's kind of a memoir about Rachel Held Evans' like growing up very certain in her evangelical Christian beliefs, and then how she started asking questions and realizing that asking questions is not a bad thing, and like just like the messy parts of I guess it would be called like deconstructing your faith and reconstructing it. This was the first book I had read from Rachel Held Evans. I'd been meaning to get to her works for a while, but after she very tragically and very suddenly died a couple of years ago, I put it off. I had been following her work online, and I really loved her work online that I had read, and she seemed like such a wonderful person, so I really admired what she was doing. But after she died, I didn't feel like ready to read her books yet, and so I'm glad I finally did read this one, and I really, really liked it. She has such a warm and funny and engaging writing style. She's very like honest. She's very like, I'm very impressed at how honest she was about like some of the things that she used to say and believe, and like how she came to believe things differently. But it's also a very welcoming book and a very non-judgmental book. She's just a very compassionate person, and she's just very upfront about like, you know, this is what she used to believe, this is how she used to see the world, and then realizing that that didn't fit with what she felt in her heart, the way she wanted to treat other people. And I really like the focus in this book of asking questions and like having issues and talking about those issues with like your religion, and how that's not a bad thing, how that's actually a very good thing. I just really liked that. And I also think this is a very, I feel like it's a widely applicable book. Like I'm not evangelical, I don't have that specific background, but I still got a lot out of this book, and there were still things she talked about that I think can apply to different Christian denominations. And I just think that's really cool. Like, she did talk about some specific experiences, of course, but even if I couldn't relate to those experiences, I still got a lot out of this book, and I do think it's worth reading. I think it was just really well done. It was also interesting to see how, based on things I've read from her later, it was interesting to see how like she continued to evolve, like the way she talked about these ideas and the way she felt about things. So I think that was really interesting as well. And I gave Faith Unraveled 4 stars. Next, I finished a reread, and that was Grounded: The Adventures of Rapunzel by Megan Morrison. This is the first book in the Time series, which I have a whole spoiler-free review for, so I will link that down below if you would like more thoughts. But this is a trilogy of fairy tale retellings. They're companion books, but they are chronological, so I would recommend reading them in order. And this first book follows Rapunzel, as you can probably guess. And I just love this series so much. So we're following Rapunzel, and one day she's in her tower, and she, through a series of circumstances, she ends up kind of getting kidnapped, kind of rescuing, it's messy, this boy named Jack, and they end up having to go kind of on a quest together, and along the way Rapunzel learns a lot more about the world. She learns more about Witch, who has kept her in this tower and who Rapunzel has grown up loving. I just really love this story. I think this is such a phenomenal example of character development, and I've mentioned before how like it makes me sad that I see so many people who DNF this book because Rapunzel's very naive at the beginning, or like annoying, and like I get that, she is, but also like she has literally been kept in a tower her entire life. Like, naive characters don't bother me if I understand why they are that way, and like I think Rapunzel has a pretty good excuse, and I do think that, for me at least, her character development was worth it. Like, I just really, really enjoyed seeing her really come into her own and like learn more about the world and about herself, and like she doesn't become an unrecognizable character. Like, you still see like the core of who she is, but she becomes so much more confident and so much more like knowledgeable. I also really loved Jack as a character, and I really liked the two of their dynamic. I really enjoy like the setting. I've mentioned before how the world of Time is so interesting because it seems very like cutesy almost, like it's like a, you know, fairy tale world, and all the countries are named after colors, and there's like fairies and fairy godmothers and blah blah blah. But throughout the series we really see kind of the undercurrent, like the darker undercurrent of what's going on in these countries, and I just think that's done really well. Each of the books tackles at least one like really, I think, heavy issue. Like, this book deals a lot with like emotional abuse and just unhealthy or toxic like family relationships, and I think that's done just really beautifully. I think the end of this book is so emotional, so well done. I think the characterization and the relationships are so interesting and so complex. I also really like the writing of this series itself. It's not like flashy, like it's not super flowery or anything, but I think Megan Morrison is great at just the right amount of everything, you know? I think she does dialogue really well. I think she does setting really well without overdoing it. And yeah, like I said, I think that the way she does characters especially is just really good. So I loved this once again. As with the first time I read it, I gave Grounded 4.5 stars. Although, like, I don't know, I keep saying, I'm like, maybe this will eventually end up as a 5-star because I do think this book is so fantastic. So anyway, but I loved this and was really happy to finally reread it. And finally, the last book I'm going to talk about today is Snow White and Rose Red by Patricia C. Reedy. This is a fairy tale retelling of course, Snow White and Rose Red, and it's set in Elizabethan England, which was one of the reasons I wanted to read it for All the World's a Page. And this was just so fun. This was like just a really wonderful surprise because I did not really know what to expect of this book. Apparently on Goodreads I had put it on my TBR longest shelf, so obviously I've had this book for a while, and I'm so glad I finally got to it because I loved it. There were a lot of things that just personally really made this work for me. Like, we had Elizabethan England, we had some fairies, we had a fairy tale retelling, we had some sister relationships, we had a little bit of romance, we had some really fun herbal magic. Like, this was just a good time and really worked for me in a lot of ways. So we're following the two sisters, Blanche and Rosamond, and they live with their mother in a cottage on the edge of the woods, and in this woods there's like some normal part and then there's the fairy part. And Blanche and Rosamond are very careful, but they do sometimes venture into the fairy world to collect herbs for their mother, because their mother does like a little bit of magic, but obviously doesn't want to advertise that because this is Elizabethan England. So we're following them, and we're also following these two fairy princes. Well, they're half fairy and half human, which is a really interesting combination or like background. Some bad things end up happening to one of them, and the other one, his brother, sort of ends up enlisting the help of Blanche and Rosamond and their mother to try and break a spell that's on him. And then we're also following the kind of antagonists of this book. Like, there are a couple of humans who are doing some like sinister magic. There's also a fairy woman who is trying to like separate the human and the fairy world. And then there's later like a person in the village who's also bad. That was like really one of my only criticisms of this book, is there were too many antagonists and I didn't like they were just annoying. I didn't like reading about them. I said in my Goodreads review, like, I was trying to think of a better way to describe them, but like really they're just like annoying. That's all I've got. I didn't like them. But otherwise I really, really loved this book. I loved the characters in it. I really liked the sister relationship. I really liked the fairy elements and the way those were incorporated. I thought the Elizabethan setting was fun. I do want to mention that the dialogue is sort of like Elizabethan flavored. The narration style is much closer to modern English, so that's not an issue. But if you were worried about going into this, I actually think it's very approachable. I think if you've had even a tiny bit of experience with reading Shakespeare, you would do fine. But even if you haven't, I think you would be fine just looking up the definitions for like the handful of Elizabethan words that they use, like be like, meaning maybe, and meaning if, that kind of thing. Like, so really, if you're interested in the book but you're worried about that, I don't think you need to be worried about that. So yeah, I really enjoyed the writing of this. This also just felt like a very cozy story, even though there were some obviously bad things happening. Like, just like the setting and the magic and the writing and the fact that it's Patricia C. Reedy, who I have like reread her books a bunch, and I'm kicking myself for not getting to the ones I haven't read sooner, because obviously I loved this. I thought the plot was interesting. I liked the magic elements. So yeah, I just really, really loved this. As I said, the only things I didn't like were, I think there were too many antagonists and they were annoying to me, and also there was one of the romances that I was really disappointed in and I wish we had gotten more development for. I understand that with certain fairy tales there are plot elements that constrain that, but I still think we could have done better. I didn't like it. It felt kind of weird and just not very developed. And especially because the other romance I really liked, even though their scenes were like relatively few. I think I really liked their romance, so it's like we could have done better on the other one. But other than that, I really liked this. I gave Snow White and Rose Red 4.5 stars. Okay, everybody, so that was my first part of my August wrap up. I feel like I've been talking a lot and I feel like it was just not a good words a day. I don't know if any of you guys who make videos feel like this, but sometimes you film and just you are not good with words, and I feel like that's what happened. So this is gonna be an absolute monster to edit. But please comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!